Hello, designers. Welcome to part one of a four-part series on using Adobe Dimension for creating package design prototypes where your output needs to be set for print. Along the way, we will also discuss workflow from Adobe Illustrator with your vector graphics for your packaging. Let's go ahead and get started here. I'm going to open up Adobe Dimension and create new. Start with a fresh, clean document. I don't have anything preset in here, so right now this should be showing whatever you have as your default in here. First thing we want to change over here on the right hand side in the panels, if we look at the properties section, we want to change the resolution. Right now we're set to screen at 72 and we need 300 pixels per inch for print resolution. The next thing I want to change, I'd like to have a usable canvas size here. So I want to change my canvas units to inches so that I have a better idea what size my canvas actually is. I find that 10 by 8 inches is a reasonable size to work at for print output. The consideration that you want to have here is you want to try to gauge what is the largest size image that you would need for your final format where you are going to be placing the images that are your final renders of your prototype. Thinking about a letter size page that's 8.5 wide, if my image is 10 wide, that's actually going to be plenty bigger than what I'm going to need for placement, layout, usage. And it also allows me to actually shrink the size down a little, which will just tighten up the image a little bit and really make everything sing. Now that I changed my size, my canvas is outside of my viewport, so I'm just going to hit Command 0 to fit inside my viewport, just like you would in Illustrator. And the next thing I'm going to change, I want to change here under the properties my scene units to inches so that when I start building my actual package prototypes in here, I can put in the real physical dimensions of my packages so that my sizing is correct and my proportions don't change from the die lines that I've already constructed. Okay, we are set up and ready to roll in here. I'm going to forego going through all the navigation and tools and those sorts of things. I think that is very well documented in a lot of different places. Adobe kills it with short tutorial videos and walkthroughs that start at the most basic intro beginner level and go all the way through advanced functionality. What I'm going to do to set up a backdrop for the prototype that I'm going to place in here. I'm just going to use a couple planes. I'm going to get them sized and positioned here. And then later when we get to step 2 in the modeling process, adding materials, remember 3D modeling is a 4-step process. Number 1, we build. So we get our objects, models, into the actual scene or environment. Number 2, we texture. And for us here in Dimension, that's adding materials to our models or 3D objects. Number 3, we do lighting. If when you get to the lighting stage you haven't done this yet, I would suggest that's a really good time to add camera bookmarks to your scene so that when you go out to render, you have multiple views of your prototype to render available to you. And then lastly, you would move over to render and any kind of post that you would need to do in Photoshop. Adobe Dimension does a really good job of kicking out layered Photoshop files that occasionally there is some work that you're going to want to do in post. Okay. So I have this plane here and I do want it to stay flat to the ground. I just moved over to my scale tool really quickly by hitting S on the keyboard. And what I want to do is make this plane ridiculously huge. And that works for me. The intent is that later when I get down to zooming in on my package, I want to make sure I can get to a place where I have the entire viewport filled with this plane and don't have any edges anywhere. So I'm plenty big. I'm 123 inches square here. The last thing I'm going to do while I have this selected with the move tool, so I just went back to V on the keyboard. V is in Victor. And you will see I do this quite often while I'm working to ensure that I have objects where I think they are in space, in the environment. I like this move to ground button. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. I was actually on the ground. And I could have done that by looking at my XYZ coordinates here of my plane, but I find this move to ground button really, really handy. Okay, I'm just going to pan back a little bit and zoom out. And then I also need to move sideways just a bit so I can see this thing. The next move that I'm going to do, I'm going to select this plane one more time. I'm going to copy, Command C, paste, Command V as in Victor. And then this is, so the first plane is going to be the ground so that I have material on the ground. The second plane that I just copied and pasted, I am going to use as the backdrop or back wall of my scene. So what I'm doing now, I hit R to get the rotate tool. I'm holding shift to constrain my angles as I'm rotating, and I'm just pulling this perpendicular to the ground, which also is perpendicular to this original plane. And I'm going to give it one more rotation, holding shift to get it flat camera. So if I orbit around here, you can see what I have set up is this nice area. I'll actually place my prototype right in here. The last thing I need to do, if I grab the move tool again, is push this guy here so that he's actually closing off this space as well as I can do. Now I'm going to go back to my original view that I was working with. Occasionally for lighting purposes, what I like to do, and you can also rotate with the move gimbal if you can grab these circles here, and I'm going to hold shift, is tilt this back so that the light can get in here. And then I'm just gonna look at this from the front so I can see how my rotation is going. And again, I'm just trying to keep this stuff flat to camera, and that looks pretty good. So I just turn this back where it was. Okay, and get back to front and get a little look at this. And then let's rotate this one more time back here, and let's call that close enough to flat because we aren't actually going to see any of that up there. That gives it just enough angle that I can see in there and get things together. And then this is actually the space that I'm going to be working in. I'm going to go ahead and set a camera bookmark here right next to the render preview with the little camera icon, and the star is the camera bookmark panel. I'm going to call this home because that's going to be where I want to return to after I've been spinning around and checking everything. I'm going to go ahead and save my file, and then we're going to move on to part two and start our build.